Hello everyone, my name is Phawx. In today's video, I'll be reviewing the AYANEO 2S. Many of you are already acquainted with the AYANEO 2, and this is essentially an enhanced refresh of that model. As a result, I'll only touch briefly on the aspects that I've previously covered in past reviews, given that a large portion of the device remains consistent, barring a few key performance differences. To kick things off, we'll delve into the most significant difference between the two models, their performance. I'll start by outlining the specifications of the AYANEO 2S. The AYANEO 2S comes in several configurations, including a GEEK 1S model. This budget-friendly option with 16 gigs of RAM priced at $700 is designed to compete with the performance profile of the Asus ROG Ally. One of the key differences is the upgraded AMD chip, specifically the AMD 7840U, which not only surpasses the performance of the earlier 6800U chip, but also currently outperforms the Asus ROG Ally. I'll touch base on this in benchmarks later on in this video. Looking at this infographic, you can note a significant factor, the RAM configurations. Beyond the storage options, it's these RAM configurations that underscore the substantial differences and potential of this platform. You can opt for either up to 32 gigs or a colossal 64 gigs of system RAM. On top of all these capacity options, we are running the fastest RAM possible, which is LPDDR5 7500. This may seem excessive for a handheld exclusive device, but it's heartening to see these leaps in configuration. But also, we have to concede that the latest modern games that have been coming out have started using an excessive amount of VRAM. And since APUs leverage system RAM for VRAM, this can be one way to tackle that issue. What's also encouraging is that all the new models, including the GEEK 1S, come with an upgraded heatsink, an upgrade introduced in earlier versions of the AYANEO 2. There is a whole segment of this video where we'll discuss the thermals shortly. As for other features, they're largely consistent with previous models, including a 50 watt-hour battery, familiar controls with Hall-based analog sticks and triggers, which I'll expand on shortly, as well as a full glass front screen, a fingerprint sensor, the SoundTap Magic Rumble, dual gyroscopes, and capping it off with that same excellent 7-inch 1200p screen. Before I finish this segment of the video, I wanted to quickly point out that the GEEK 1S, which has an 800p screen, which is frankly perfect for the 7840U, has a 32GB configuration that is $800. And that price includes free shipping. Without a doubt, this specific configuration is the best value and offers a handheld that, at the very least, offers compelling reason to choose this over the Ally. So that's the quick overview on specs. Let's see what that actually means. Let's quickly go over the build quality. I was lucky enough to finally score a beat-up model of the AYANEO 2S. It's really cool to see one in person, and I appreciate that there are these special versions that are created. Overall, the 2S is quite similar to the AYANEO 2, so I'll be retreading some comments I've talked about prior. The overall quality of the plastic is great as expected, and the quality of the printwork is also top-notch. Largely, the screen is what everyone is going to be attracted to, as the complete glass covering for the screen creates this endless bezel look that somehow makes the display look completely magical. It is, however, still a portrait-based panel, and overall, the screen's only strength is the quality and not its feature set. Included in the build quality is the look at the analog sticks, triggers, and the rest of the gamepad inputs. Because these are all pretty much the same as the 2S, we have the same excellent hole-based analog sticks. AYANEO continues its trend of catering to circular inputs, but dead zones, cardinal magnetism, are very relaxed, which is truly excellent as it offers extreme precision in the sticks. On top of all of these great qualities, the analog caps used on the sticks are my favorite type, concave and a nice ridge surrounding it. Truly excellent analog sticks. Continuing along, AYANEO still has the same membrane-based D-pad, which is quite good. It's not my favorite D-pad, but overall it's quite solid. Great feedback, not mushy at all, solid B+. Likewise, the face buttons are also membrane-based and overall have a really snappy feedback that is a joy to use. Finishing up are the bumpers and hull-based triggers. The L1 and R1 are satisfactory, but the L2 and R2 are a bit cartoonishly large for me. The amount of travel, while crazy accurate, just feels a bit weird in practice. Finishing off the build quality, let's talk about the thermals. First, let's talk about the upgraded heatsink that is in the AYANEO 2S. If we take a look at this graph, this is a 3-hour burn-in running at 28 watt while under load. During that entire time, we stay under 70 degrees Celsius. This is a pretty significant improvement compared to the previous AYANEO 2, basically a 10-degree improvement. Significant and impressive, and I'm glad this heatsink is also present on the GEEK 1S model. Now let's pivot to looking at thermals externally. At 28 watt, after 3 hours, we can see that the right-hand side of the display is the absolute hottest point on the device. Generally speaking, your hand shouldn't ever touch around this area, but it will be hot to the touch. Flipping the handheld over, we can see where all the heat is centralized in the center of the device, but where you hold the device is relatively cool. This is an area where we could hopefully see improvements in later versions, and reducing thermal radiation to the outer panels is critical to using devices like this. Next up, let's talk about battery life. I've made a single graph here to very quickly showcase real case, worst case battery life. This range of battery life is between 7 and 28 watt while the device is at 50% brightness. What this means is that the best base battery life at 7 watt is 210 minutes or 3.5 hours, or 70 minutes on battery when running at 28 watt. At 15 watt, you should expect around 100 minutes of battery life, so similar to Steam Deck, but a bit more because we have a slightly larger battery. Now let's talk about performance benchmarks and get an understanding of what the AYANEO 2S is capable of. Just a quick note, there was an updated BIOS that the AYANEO team sent to me, and after flashing that BIOS, overall performance was improved across the board. Additionally, RAM can now run up to 7500 MT speeds with this BIOS. Further, I am running the latest version of Windows 11 22H2, and we're still using a preview driver for the 7840U. EPP was set to 60, and power schema has been configured to prefer sending power to GPU instead of CPU. CPU clocks are set to default instead of the 4 GHz clock limit originally set. With that said, let's start talking about the benchmarks. All right, so here we are taking a look at benchmarks once again. Now, I've done a bunch of benchmarks on the 7840U, the Z1E that's on the Asus ROG Ally. There are a bit more in-depth looks at those on previous videos of them, so I'm going to try to concentrate what we're looking at here down to 15 watt and 25 watt, and I'm going to compare it to the GBD1 Max 2, the 7840U, which is not named right now, it just says this AMD 7840U Zen 4. Then we have the AYANEO 2S, a 6800U Zen 3 Plus, and then a Ryzen Z1E, which is on the Asus ROG Ally. So we're going to go through 15 and 25 watt. Up first, we're taking a look at Batman Arkham Knight. This is 800p max settings, no NVIDIA GameWorks. And if we take a look at this, what we're looking at is that we're about 13% difference, and largely a lot of these tests are going to be between 10 and 15% of a performance difference between the GBD1 Max 2. I am able to extract a bit more performance on that platform. Largely, this is anything that is very GPU bound. If I force a game into very, very CPU bound territory, actually there is not much of a difference, only at the lower end of TDP, but at the higher end of TDP. I'm going to show you a quick graph here on Heaven. This is a Heaven benchmark showing you the entire thing at a CPU bound test, 720p, all low settings. We can see that at the earlier side, the low side of TDP, the GBD1 Max 2 ekes ahead a bit, but as we start going over 13 watt, pretty much the AYANEO 2S and the GBD1 Max 2 7840U are in alignment. However, when we go into a GPU bound test, we can see pretty much a 10 to 15% performance difference across every wattage. And that's what we're going to be seeing a lot in these types of different benchmarks that we're going to be taking a look here, such as Batman Arkham Knight. But if we take a look at the 6800U, we can see that the 7840U is pulling a little bit ahead, but the Ally is slacking behind the most of them. Let's go ahead and take a look at 25 watt. All right, so looking at the 25 watt benches, we can see that once again, the AYANEO 2S is a little bit behind, about 10% behind on averages on the between the GBD1 Max 2 7840U and the AYANEO 2S 7840U. Both of these platforms are 32 gigabytes, same type of RAM configuration, same type of speed. Again, the newer BIOS on the AYANEO 2S has those 7500 MT speeds available to it. But if we look at the Z1E, we're a bit behind at 25 watt speeds, as well as 6800U. The 7840U AYANEO 2S is about 10% faster. All right, next up, we're going to be taking a look at 15 watt TDP slice for Cyberpunk 2077. The settings that I'm using is, once again, 800p. This is the Steam Deck preset that's on Cyberpunk. The only other difference that I did was I disabled any type of image upscaling, so there is no FSR2, as well as I increased the FOV scale from, I think it was like 80 to 100, and that's my settings for Cyberpunk. This is one instance where we can actually see the Z1E is pulling ahead about 15%, and my 7840U is around 18% better than the AYANEO 2S. Let's go ahead and take a look at 25 watt. All right, looking at the 25 watt slice for this particular benchmark, this is a bit interesting. If we take a look at the AYANEO 2S, if we look at our 1 percentile, we're actually doing considerably good compared to the other platforms. The Z1E, this is the one of the few tests that actually showed better results on the Z1E at 25 watt. We're pulling ahead over the GBD1 Max 2 7840U. But more or less, my AYANEO 2S and my GBD1 Max 2 7840U are pretty much in alignment here with regard to averages at 25 watt. Overall, the 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile are far more ideal. Honestly, I would look at this as a clear win for the AYANEO 2S. All right, next up, we're going to be taking a look at the 15 watt TDP slice for Deus Ex Mankind Divided. My settings are 800p. This is DirectX 11 backend and all high max settings, the max settings they can possibly go. And if we take a look here, pretty much we're looking at a 17% difference between my GPU MX2 7840U and the AYANEO 2S. If we take a look at the 6800U and the 7840U, we're pretty much in alignment at 15 watt. However, the 1 percentile and 0.2 percentile are tiny bit better. 1 percentile is basically the same, but the 0.2 percentile is pulling ahead a bit, and then the Z1E is lagging behind. Moving on over to the 25 watt TDP slice, a lot of these are really starting to just kind of come together and look very, very similar. The Z1E is basically the same as the AYANEO 2S. Only my 7840U is pulling ahead a bit, and we're basically very similar to the 6800U as well. So this is one area where the differences between RDNA 2 and RDNA 3 are not apparent, and one of these issues where we can see that we are exceedingly GPU bound in this particular scenario, and we're not pulling ahead very, very efficiently at this point. The next up, we're going to be taking a look at the 15 watt TDP slice for Ryzen 0 Dawn. The settings that I'm using is 800p, and I'm also using the favorite performance preset that's available inside the game options. If we take a look at this, once again, the GPU MX2 7840U is pulling ahead a bit. We're about 12% better on averages, 10% better on 1 percentile, and the 6800U are basically looking kind of similar. And then the Z1E, we're about 14% better on the AYANEO 2S. Now, largely, a lot of these things are going to come down to clearly, there are still differences that need to get sorted out between firmware, AGESA, SMU, and drivers. Even to this day, we're already past the midpoint month of June. We're almost into July, and we still don't even have AMD's June drivers available to us. So we really need to have those drivers to really get a better idea. A lot of these are still using, everything that's RDNA 3 is still using preview drivers to this point. So this is where things are landing at the current moment. All right, taking a look at the 25 watt TDP slice, we can see that the AYANEO 2S and my GPU MX2 74U are basically the same. It's 3% difference. 3% difference is a margin of error difference. So effectively, the AYANEO 2S and the 7840U WinMax 2 are basically the same. We're getting a 10% performance increase over the 6800U, and likewise, the Z1E is finding itself far behind in this pack. All right, now we're going to be taking a look at the 15 watt TDP slice for Metro Exodus. This is using 800p, lowest settings possible. Once again, we can see that 15 watt are the GPU WinMax 2, 7840U is pulling ahead a bit, about 20% better in this particular part in averages, 12% on 1 percentile. If we take a look at the 6800U, the AYANEO 2S is quite similar to the 6800U in terms of performance, with the Z1E lagging behind all of them. Let's go ahead and take a look at the 25 watt. And taking a look at the 25 watt slice for Metro Exodus, we can see that the AYANEO 2S is basically in line with where the GPU WinMax 2 7840U is. 3%, 4% better on averages, exactly the same on 1 percentile. This is where we see that 14% or 10% improvement over the Z1E, and we see a 25% improvement over the 6800U. So this is one area where, specifically with the drivers that are on preview drivers, really do seem to excel for Metro Exodus. And the last benchmark that we're going to be looking at for this video, we're going to be taking a look at Returnal. Now we're looking at the 15 watt TDP slice for Returnal. This is 720p, all low settings. This game is exceedingly GPU bound and will brutalize the GPU. This is one game where we're really going to highlight the lack of GPU and the thing that we need the most on all these handhelds, because we have an abundance of CPU, but we really need to really improve GPU performance and get more memory bandwidth. So if we take a look at my GPU MX 2, you can see I'm getting around 34 FPS average here on the AYANEO 2S. The WinMax 2 7040U is around 16% better, but we're considerably better than the 6800U, being 16% better versus the 6800U. Likewise for the Z1E. Z1E finds itself falling quite behind compared to the AYANEO 2S. And looking at the 25 watt TDP slice, we can see basically that the AYANEO 2S and the WinMax 2 7840U are once again pretty much identical. 1 percentile is exactly the same. 0.2 percentile is a 4% difference, most like a margin error. 1% difference, margin of error. So realistically, both of these platforms are looking quite similar, 25 watt, and we're about 12% better on averages for the Z1E. Likewise, for the 6800U, we're almost 20% better. Largely not a large difference when we're taking a look at these particular platforms. So when you're taking a look at 7840U, especially right now with our current BIOS, AGESA, SMU, and driver set that we have available to us, we might not be seeing the most ideal conditions. The WinMax 2 7040U is one of the few that are showing pretty much 20% better across at every different wattage that we have available to us. But largely, this is still a very early look and only looking at preview drivers that are available to us. One other thing that I want to point out here is that the preview driver that I have that's updated on the WinMax 2 does not install on the AYANEO 2S, which is odd. So apparently there are differences to the 7840U insofar as what type of driver can be installed on them. So we still are waiting for official drivers to launch. And until then, I don't think we're going to get a pretty accurate reading from that until that happens, especially as they mature. But this is what things look at right now. And the AYANEO 2S looks like it's above the Z1E, but still trailing behind the WinMax 2. However, the BIOS update that happened for the AYANEO 2S did improve performance. So I'm hoping that those types of performance improvements can still continue from the BIOS end, but also from the driver end as soon as AMD releases official drivers. So that's pretty much the look at benchmarks for this device. Let's get on to the rest of this review. So that's my in-depth look at the AYANEO 2S. Right now, my personal recommendation is that you should be looking at the 32GB GEEK 1S model, as that is what I would personally feel comfortable telling people to get. Not only is that the best value, but it also offers a compelling product compared to what is available on the market today. There is a tremendous amount of competition in the PC gaming handheld space right now, and we have a ton of options. Some might actually say that AYANEO has too many options, and I would agree here. I can commiserate with the AYANEO team as they have to come out with these 7840U models, because if they don't, competitors will leave them behind. The good news is that we aren't going to see the next generation until next year, and the 2S is poised to start delivering immediately. If you already have an AYANEO 2, there isn't a ton of reasons to get the 2S or the GEEK 1S. The better heatsink and current performance upgrade isn't generational. But if you initially skipped on the 6800U model, yeah, it's super easy to recommend the AYANEO 2S or GEEK 1S. The AYANEO team took their already solid base of the 2 and improved in it in a number of areas as a solid iteration. Hopefully this video has been informative. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.